I don't know if the sound is test. Yeah, it's working. I guess I have to be real quick here. I just got an order, which happens pretty often as soon as I'm like hitting the button to go. Boom, there's an order. I don't know how many times that's happened already. Literally almost the same second. But there's plenty of times it hasn't happened like that. These people that do this specific thing are tricking the church world, because they expose some things that the church world does, and then they're caught doing the exact same heart sin, the same using scripture to throw down scripture. And you know, there's like nothing nastier to me than someone that's actually using the favor to sin, like we read Galatians 5 and elsewhere. We read that walking in the Spirit doesn't complete the lusts of the flesh, and they're not understanding justified by the law, trying to be justified by the law. Those under the law, they don't know what being under the law means. They're not perceiving it with spiritual eyes and ears. And it's incredibly simple. You would think saying the words would make someone understand, and yet it doesn't. They're blinded by the Creator, and his judgments are too powerful. They don't ask and they don't seek him with their heart. They don't understand also. They're not perceiving. You know, it's a veil, it's a blinding, saying it a lot. It's a strong blinding to dig a ditch, to trap someone so that they fall into it. And then you end up walking in the ditch you dug, just like we read over and over. That's what happens to people that try to attack, cause someone to sin or hope they sin. You know, this is what they do. The carnal man does the same evil works. Maybe I could get away with just reading Galatians 5 real quick. Stand fast, therefore, in the liberty by which Messiah has made us free. Right? Nothing to do with free will, but being freed from sin and death, and coming out of Egypt and works and bondage. Do not be entangled again with the yoke of bondage. There it is. Indeed, I, Paul, say to you that if you become circumcised, Messiah will profit you nothing. And I testify again to every man who becomes circumcised that he is a debtor to keep the whole law. He's not talking literal words here. He's not talking about literally being circumcised. It's not even about this. It's what the mind and heart is doing. If a carnal man becomes circumcised in the heart, understanding, putting itself under the law out of self-righteousness and pride, that's what he's talking about. And we read it right after. You have become estranged from Messiah, you who attempt to be justified by the law, which is to circumcise yourself in the mind and heart, doing it for that understanding and that intention. It's always going to be out of pride and I'm better than someone. It comes down to that simple. You have fallen from grace, for we, through the Spirit, eagerly wait for the hope of righteousness by faith. For in Messiah Yahushua neither circumcision nor uncircumcision avails anything, but faith working through love. You ran well who hindered you from obeying the truth. This persuasion does not come from him who calls you. A little leaven leavens the whole lump. A little false doctrine grows into a monster. That's what the little leaven swelling. Messiah taught this, that the harlot, the religions, the Judases, the look called out, the false, the carnal, pump in secret leaven in the darkness until the whole thing is baked and lumped. It's a spiritual leaven getting inside of people, the backwards spirit understanding in people. They never believe what they say, and they never say what they believe, which is a liar and a deceiver. I have confidence you in Yahuwah that you will have no other mind, but he who troubles you shall bear his judgment, whoever he is. And I, brethren, if I still preach circumcision, why do I still suffer persecution? He's not speaking about what the carnal man understands with the law and circumcision and what it represents. Self-righteousness, trying to keep the law in a literal carnal way even. That's the danger. That's what has nothing to do with his favor. It has nothing to do with self doing the works. And yet we got to keep the spiritual law, which is not of ourself, because the Spirit is always willing and doing what's right. To walk in the Spirit is to keep all these things. If I still preach circumcision, why do I still suffer persecution? Then the offense of the cross has ceased, the stake. I could wish that those who trouble you even cut themselves off. Not talking about physically cutting themselves. For you, brethren, have been called to liberty. Only do not use liberty as an opportunity for the flesh, but through love serve one another. For all the law is fulfilled in one word, even in this: you shall love your neighbor as yourself. And that is true. It does go back to that, and to love, and to the Creator, of which a carnal man has no love or understanding of love in his commandments. But if you bite and devour one another, don't beasts do that? Beware lest you be consumed by one another. Don't beasts do that? And now the contrast. I say then, walk in the Spirit, and you shall not fulfill the lust of the flesh. For the flesh lusts against the Spirit, and the Spirit against the flesh. And these are contrary to one another, so that you do not do the things that you wish. Now they're warring against each other, so you don't do what you want and wish. Where's the free will there? There is none. They're warring against each other, so we don't do what we want. And he's shown me this thing for those that are under Messiah in his favor. And it's only for those, if someone's in Messiah, the true Messiah. These things happen, and it actually protects us, because someone that does intentions with the Spirit, with the heart on purpose, they're dead. They're stoned to death without mercy. It's not speaking of having mercy on all later. This is about right now. His judgments right now. As someone that's doing their own works, carrying sticks on the Sabbath, doing their own works, with intention from themselves to do works of themselves, which always will be Adam and Eve works of darkness and evil, bad fruit, evil works. They're stoned to death. And that's a spiritual stoning to death. It's a spiritual destruction. Dead, they're not a brother, they're not a sister. They're not of Messiah, if we spot that. So that you do not do the things that you wish. But if you are led by the Spirit, then you are not under the law. Right? It's not up to our own ability. And the law is spiritual, meaning it doesn't mean what the letters say. That is not the meaning of any word in his word. There's the spiritual spirit meaning that only the Father can do the works, and only walking in the Spirit do the works. Now the works of the flesh are evident, which are adultery, fornication, uncleanness, lewdness. People doing these things are exposing themselves of not being under Messiah, that teach that they're in some kind of delusional liberty, so that they can sin all they want. Did they forget these words? The works of the flesh, which are those in the flesh, cannot please him. Those in the flesh are, in death, because they're always being condemned by the law, whether they agree with the law or not. The law is a righteous law, and those doing those works, it's evident that they're in the flesh only, that they're not believers. And here's some works of the flesh. He gives an example: adultery, fornication, uncleanness, lewdness, idolatry, sorcery, hatred, contentions. Wow, these are not the works of the Spirit, they're works of the flesh. The Father is not an adulterer, a fornicator, unclean. He's not lewd, he's not idolatry, he doesn't commit sorcery. The Father has no hatred, has no contentions, no jealousies, no outbursts of wrath, no selfish ambitions, no dissensions, no heresies, no envy, no murders, no drunkenness. He doesn't cause revelries and the like, of which I tell you beforehand, just as I also told you in time past, that those who practice such things will not inherit the kingdom of Elohim. Of course, it takes to get understanding from the Father, because we can read words that make it look like with the letters that the Creator is these things, some of these things. Because we read he's jealous, his wrath, the hatred. They're not understanding it all. This is all of the flesh, carnal, evil works. The Father's hatred, there's a good way and an evil way for everything. And his image, who he is, his character is all perfect and good. Therefore, there is a good way. There is a good jealousy that the world doesn't comprehend. There's a good hatred, to have the hatred the Father hates for evil. But I just want to get through this, I guess, this chapter. Those who practice things will not inherit the kingdom of God. But the fruit or works of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, long-suffering, kindness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Yes, self-control. Flesh is out of control. Against such there is no law. It takes to understand this. You can't give the understanding. These people can't give it either, but they act as if they can. There's many out there that are doing the works of the flesh, doing spiritual wicked works, breaking the spiritual law. All those words we read, there's that spiritual envy and hatred with the heart and lies and jealousy, these things. It's when those things are spotted, those are works of the flesh. The fruit or work of the Spirit is joy, peace, long kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Against such there is no law, because the Father's perfect and the Spirit is always willing and always doing what's right. There's no law against good. The law is for the unrighteous, but they're not understanding what it means to be under the law, of which all Israel and even the Old Covenant saints were under the law. They were only types of those that had faith, types of those more specifically that had his favor, but they didn't in reality have his favor. They were still under the law. And that's really important to see that and rightly divide, of which the whole church world and anyone that's carnal does not understand. They stay away from what they don't understand. They stay away from scriptures on purpose that contradict what they're saying. That's doing wickedness and deceiving people on purpose. And when they're questioned if they are, they run and they do those things. And then the wrath and murder comes in the heart. Those who are Messiahs have crucified the flesh with its passions and desires. If we live in the Spirit, let us also walk in the Spirit. Let us not become conceited, provoking one another, envying one another. And then we continue to read, restoring such a one in the spirit of gentleness. For yourself, lest you also be tempted. Bear one another's burdens, and so fulfill the law of Messiah. Yet fulfill the law. Those words mean something else when these people who abuse his liberty and favor, they see something else when they read these words. For if anyone else thinks himself to be something when he is nothing, he deceives himself. But let each one examine his own work, and then he will have rejoicing in himself alone. Let each one examine his own work, the spiritual works, and then he will have rejoicing in himself alone and not in another. For each one shall bear his own load, like Messiah carried the stake, bearing his load. They don't know what this means. Those that abuse his favor and liberty, not in it. Those who abuse it must not be in his favor, because then they would know and hear from the Father. And they wouldn't be lewd, even making videos of themselves being lewd, full of, flesh desires and lust. The word lust is like love, in that like all the evil things can go back to like lust, just like all the good things from the Father goes back to love, the Creator's love. So examine each one's work. This is going to be backwards for a carnal man, because the carnal man always wants to boast in others and his flesh and show off and receive worship constantly. But if each one examines his own work and not in another, and he will have rejoicing in himself alone and not in another. Let him who is taught the word share in all good things with him who teaches. Do not be deceived. Elohim is not mocked. For whatever a man sows, that he will also reap. For he who sows of the flesh reap corruption. He who sows to the Spirit will of the Spirit reap age-lasting life, everlasting life. Let us not grow weary while doing good, for in due season we shall reap if we do not lose heart. Therefore, as we have opportunity, let us do good to all, especially to those who are the household of faith. Is the Creator doing evil to all? Is he waiting for someone to be good and self-righteous, and that's why they go to heaven? You know, could talk about it for a few hours on why this is evil, but it is always reduced to a few words and a word. Self-righteous is to be an enemy of the Creator, is to do works of the flesh. It's connected. Those that are continually self-righteous also do all those works of the flesh. They also break the spiritual law continually, because you know them by their fruits, Messiah said. Those that are doing the works of darkness. We're not talking about natural things. That's why the apostle and any of his word is not understood by the carnal people. The apostle's not talking about carnal, natural things, you know, but sometimes he speaks carnally because some are weak. So he gives like a natural example of what he's really talking about, things of spirit that he's given. And these words are all spirit. So when they read these words, they get tricked and self-deceived and are deceived. People who do this, people who specifically use the liberty to sin and then say things like, I don't sin that much. What does that mean? What on earth does that mean? Someone saying that only said that. This is the discernment when it's spotted, spiritual discernment, because they're doing their own works. Someone says that because it's up to them to be good little boys and do their own work. So they say things like, I don't sin that much. It's like a child that has no understanding yet. Carnal man is a child still compared to being grown up, spiritual, maturing in Messiah. Carnal man is like a child. These who would compel you to be circumcised, only that they may not suffer persecution for the sake of Messiah, cross of Messiah. For not even those who are circumcised keep the law, but they desire to have you circumcised that they may boast in your flesh. He's not talking about physical circumcision, and that's the understanding. The circumcision, like Moses, even represents something greater than itself. This is the evil under the law called self-righteous. He's saying circumcised. They want you circumcised. They want you, in other words, they want you under the law like they are, and self-righteous like they are, and doing good of themselves, thinking they're good. They become fools and do evil works continually with their heart that are of the flesh and not of the spirit. They want you under the law like they are, and then to command and point and say, I keep, you shall not rape. I keep murder. And their circumcision is understood in this way. What it represents, like Moses representing the law, like Eve representing spiritual Israel, the mother of all living. Circumcision here represents something. He's not talking about some literal carnal cutting off of literal flesh here. That's not what he's talking about. It's not what it means. He's not speaking of that. What it represents, self-righteous. If they had any understanding, Israel was under the law and it never worked. That is the thing. That's what the Creator showed, that no one can do good works apart from him, without his spirit. No one did any good, not even the carnal saints kept the spiritual law. They're examples of keeping the commandments. Naturally, for our admonition to see that the saints love the commandments, but they didn't. No one had the Spirit of the Father and Messiah in them with power. Only the Spirit coming upon someone to prophesy, but even the prophets didn't understand the things that the disciples start to when believing in Messiah. They're freed from bondage. Under the law, it says do this, do that, do this. And what it really means is don't murder in the heart. Don't murder, don't steal in the heart. Don't rape in the heart. Keep the Sabbath day in the heart, spiritual. And so they don't realize what it is to be put under the law. A man cannot fulfill that and do it of the flesh. So therefore, it just condemns them continually. And a carnal man doesn't even realize or see that the law is spiritual. So that's why it's bad being under the law, because it didn't work. It's the Creator showing the exact opposite of free will, the perfect opposite. No one was spiritual and fulfilled the law until Messiah because of the Father's works, his Spirit in Messiah. And saying words isn't going to make anything happen. It's just for those that believe and have had mercy shown to them. Walking in the Spirit, doing good works in the Spirit, fulfilling the spiritual law. It's not the flesh trying to do what the spiritual thing is. It cannot do that. It cannot understand that. The natural man or flesh or carnal cannot do the works of the Spirit, which is the spiritual law. So to walk in the Spirit is to learn and grow in Messiah, to keep the law and commandments in the heart. There's an understanding with this, though. It has nothing to do with what a carnal man hears and understands. When we say, yes, it is for Messiah's people to keep the commandments and to keep the laws. Not in the flesh, not on our own power, not carnally. Walking in the Spirit will complete these things as we learn and grow. And the flesh, in the meantime, is dying. It can't do anything good and never did. Israel never fulfilled the law. No one did good, not even one. None are righteous of themselves, not even one. None are good. Why do you call me good? There's only one who's good except the Father, Messiah says. It's the Spirit in Messiah, the Father, that's good. And someone walking in the Spirit is growing. The kingdom is growing within. And someone in the flesh does all these evil works because a natural man can muster up not doing some of these literal works of the flesh. That's not what the apostle's talking about. It's not what Messiah is speaking of. These flesh works are spiritual works of darkness and lust in the mind and heart. When we read, when his people read adultery, we don't see what a carnal man sees for adultery. When we read lewdness, we don't see carnal lewdness only, although obviously that would be wrong. And obviously adultery would be wrong. That's like for children. Obviously murder is wrong. When we read murders and envies and thefts, not seeing what a carnal man sees, he literally cannot see anything. Zero. He's prideful, carnal, and he resists the prideful. So these people out there think they know what they're talking about, and they're doing sin and evil works before Messiah's people, before their eyes. They're being spotted as goats, and they can't see that that's so. And I'm speaking of like specifically those that abuse his favor and think they're in it because they say fancy words. These people, multiple times he's proven to me, anyone that's a liar, they stay away from some of Paul's letters on purpose and do not touch them, and no explanation for them. They never answer. They run and stay away. And then people flock to them because he wants, the carnal man wants worship from the people. But those that are in Messiah, when they know and the Father shows in the Spirit and says, you are my son or daughter, then someone will examine its own works and be happy alone, like the Messiah said, and not in another, no, and not in someone else. Everything's backwards. I gotta go. Everything's backwards. Yeah, they will rejoice within themselves alone, with the Father and Messiah in them rejoicing, because that's what the Creator has said. He will rejoice in his people. So when we do the Father's works, he blesses and rewards. And someone has this alone for themselves. And then another believer in Messiah also, doing these good works, will also alone. And then they fulfill, don't envy, don't murder, don't lust, don't do these evil works, because they're both walking in the Spirit. Walking in the Spirit is always good. The Spirit is always willing, but it's warring against the flesh so that we cannot do what we want, so we cannot do what we wish. His favor is actually protecting us, not as an excuse or a license to sin. Perfect, protecting us from actual death because of the blood covering, because of the covering, because of his favor, because of the old man. It's not up to the old man to do good. It's not up to the old man, the flesh, to do the works of the Spirit. It can't. It literally cannot do good works. Talking about reality only. It's just like I could see how this world doesn't talk about reality, so it's like desperate to keep saying and repeating over and over again that every word is speaking about actual works in the heart to be done. There's a reality to every word. In Mickey Mouse kingdom, devil kingdom, and false religion, there's no reality to anything. It's just prideful and self-righteous and boasting in other people for worshiping and doing what they command, So Messiah's people can't be commanding like a carnal man to others, because he's given us the understanding that it's the Spirit that does the good works, the Father's works. Commanding someone kills in this kind of way, doing it like this, because a carnal man, a natural man, flesh, will just try to do flesh works, of himself. But of himself he can do nothing. Messiah said, of myself I can do nothing. The works you see, everything, the good that they see, is the Father's works, the Father in him. And that's what every carnal man, whether it called out Judas, whether church world, carnal Jews, every carnal person that's actually carnal despises and does not believe that his Spirit is in his people. They don't believe that exists. Yes, that's the truth. Yes, that they're not say that. Yes, they're making a show of the opposite being true, tricking people. They consider it abomination, and they will mock you for anyone that actually believes and has the Father and Messiah in us. They will mock this very truth. Are you hearing voices? As I've seen it so often, they mock it in all kinds of different ways because they don't believe it themselves. And the Father makes them stupid as they attack. They don't realize that they just expose themselves as being an utter unbeliever, even though they're religious. And then they can't see that they just proved that they're an unbeliever because they're blind. Father blinds them while they attack. They don't know what they talk about. And every carnal man, every Judas that looks called out but doesn't know Messiah. Yes, even earthly, natural things, the Father makes him a fool, makes him an utter fool. It's just a matter of showing the utter stupid foolishness of what someone's doing. But spiritually, always doing evil works, because the flesh cannot do any good works. I'm talking things of spirit. I'm talking about spiritual envy, spiritual murder, spiritual fornication, the spiritual breaking of the covenant, spiritual rape, spiritual everything, spiritual law is spiritual. And this the flesh cannot keep. So his favor is that we die in Messiah. He died for his people. He died for the whole world, but if you believe, they die with him now. The old man is put to death. That's what it's reckoned as, speaking of the reality of Messiah's people. And whatever that old man is put to death, all his works, they don't count for. Man can't do the works. The carnal man, the old man, is put to death. Messiah, the flesh, put to death. The literal example of the spiritual thing. Messiah's flesh condemning sin through death. The flesh, the old man, dies and cannot do good. And so then the favor of the Creator is brought to his people. The blood, the favor, the covering, the replacement of this, not counted for carnal man's works, but a sacrifice to show his love. It does a lot of things to show the Creator's love, but also for all these understandings that it's the Father's works. It's self-righteousness. Everyone before Messiah was self-righteous. All of them. Everyone that ever lived was self-righteous. Even the saints were carnal saints and types of saints. Just like the bread was not the true bread, it's a type of the true bread from heaven. So Abraham's righteous in that he's a type of having the Father's favor. There was no reality yet for Abraham, though. This thing has to be understood, so it depends what we're talking about. So because of these understandings, So often you say two things and they contradict each other. Well, because in one sense it's this, and in another sense it's this. In one sense, yes, Abraham's a saint, righteous. But if we talk about reality, going back to his time, Abraham is self-righteous and doesn't have the Father Spirit of his Father Messiah working in him. You know, they hear a voice. They don't hear it in spirit, the voice in spirit. All things natural first. All things natural were fulfilled. And they will be fulfilled again as they are being fulfilled right now. The spiritual things being fulfilled. And it's very simple once the Father gives the understanding to perceive with the spiritual mind, because understanding that's given is simple and easy to him who has understanding, like we can read in Proverbs and elsewhere. When it's given, it's simple and pure and easy. And it's hard to believe we didn't have this understanding. People cannot think because someone's saying fancy words that they have understanding. You know, the blinding is so strong. His word is so simple that a fool cannot err, and yet it does because of the strong blinding. It's so simple, there's no way anyone could not understand his truth. And yet the world doesn't understand because of his judgments, because of his power and the blinding. He's made them utter fools. He's made the wisdom of this world. He created it, made it to be foolishness. Those in and of the world are also of its foolishness, in and of its foolishness. And so they think they're wise, you know, and those under Messiah will receive utter persecution, and it grows, and everyone starts attacking. This world starts attacking them. So that's why there's, you know, many like carnal Jews trying to get someone circumcised, because they're running away from the actual persecution of doing spiritual good works of the Spirit. Circumcision, in that under the law, you run from the Creator by going under the law and commanding people, and then they're in a destruction anyways. They're in death. Don't have him, don't know him, and they're going into death. They're going to be exposed one day utterly in the judgment. But his judgments are already ever present, and they always were. But first the natural, then the spiritual. And so then going under the law is like hiding, like Jonah running from him. It's to be self-righteous. Under the law, the understanding of under the law is also connected with self-righteous every time. To be under the law in that way is to be self-righteous, to be carnal and not receive anything from the Father Spirit. The natural man does not receive the things of the Spirit of the Father. It doesn't matter who or what they are. If they're natural, they don't hear from him. They haven't received his Spirit. They don't hear from the Father. Therefore, they don't know what the spiritual law is. They don't know what actual sin is. This is how it's fulfilled when we read, they call evil good and good evil. That is utterly perfect, scary perfect. But the carnal understanding, just natural, that's not true. People are always masquerading as messengers of light, like the devil is. Always looking good carnally, naturally. I don't murder, I don't steal. They make his word out to be a lie and foolish. But there's no reality to it. They're the ones deceived. When we talk about spiritual things, all of a sudden, every word is utterly perfect and true. Every carnal person calls evil good and good evil. We're talking about heart things, not natural carnal that have no benefit. The flesh profits nothing, but the Spirit gives life. They call evil good and good evil constantly because of this spiritual blinding and destruction. Murder in the heart and what it means to be perceived by Messiah's people only is good to a carnal man, because that's what they do all day long. But literal murder, that's sin to the devil, because the devil needs to masquerade as a messenger of light. And literal murder, which is also murder first in the heart to do that, there's a connection. But not murdering someone proves nothing, literally. Proves that they're trying to look good. Therefore, that's not calling good evil and evil good. Therefore, this prophecy is wrong about most people most of the time. That's what they say without saying the words. That is what they're teaching spiritually without saying the words. Doesn't matter what someone says or not. The heart and the works prove they say these things from the heart. That's the only thing we're talking about.
We say it like that because the heart's works prove it. We don't care about words by itself. They say and teach these things in that their doctrine is exposed for what they really mean and say. So they say this with their heart. This is what they really believe, which is the only valuable thing is what the heart is really doing, what their spirit is really doing, works of the flesh, lies. And so I guess that's it. I gotta go pick this thing up. If someone doesn't have understanding, they need to ask the Creator on these things and stay away from believing that man can give the understanding. That's all. Stay away from believing that man here on earth can give spiritual understanding and something that's lacking. That's what man's constantly doing so he can deceive people and self-gain for himself. That's it. A little shepherd, a little king. The only intention should be leading to the true king and to the true shepherd. That's it. If there's another intention, they're a wolf in sheep's clothing. That's it. Messiah's people know they can't do anything concerning giving the Spirit, teaching someone the spiritual required understanding of his word. Messiah knew he couldn't do that. He would like them to come in, but they would not, and he understood why they would not. No condemnation or pointing fingers, only speaking truth. And they hate it because he says, you don't come, you don't believe, you cannot hear my word because you're not of him, you're of the devil. Only speaking actual truth. And there is no sin in speaking truth with no other intention. All right, peace, take care. Seek truth from above, the Creator.